So welcome to our first ever webinar for Essential Christian Leadership. Historically, Spring Harvest, as you will know, has been resourcing the church for many years. But we've been looking at this recently as a planning group and saying, how can we resource the church throughout the year? And one of the ideas we came up with was doing a monthly webinar to serve you, the local church leader. Because we know that if the church leader grows stronger, the local church grows stronger. And so we said, let's invite different Christian leaders each month to come along and to interview them and hear from their wisdom around how they lead and how we can lead better our local churches. So I'm pleased to let you know that this month we have Gavin Calver with us. Gavin is well known to many of you, I'm sure. He's married to Anne.
Yep.
I'm right so far, aren't I?
So far, so good.
An associate Baptist minister or a trainee Baptist minister.
Who, Anne?
Yes.
Yeah, Anne's assistant minister at our Baptist church, in Stanmore.
In Stanmore Baptist Church. Two children, Amelie and Daniel. Yeah. Gavin used to lead Youth for Christ, but has now moved on to working for the Evangelical Alliance as the Director of Missions. And just within the last few weeks has taken on the leadership role of Spring Harvest. Still one of the biggest Christian events in the UK. And so welcome to you, and welcome Gavin to you as well.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And let's start with some easier questions, if that's all right, first of all. I want to know, when was what was the first thing you ever led? What was the first thing you thought, I'm leading this thing?
Oh, wow. In truth, I've captained every football team I've ever played for. So it wasn't one of those where I decided one day I'm going to lead stuff. You just happened to. But I think my first experience of realising that my leadership had the potential to be used for good was using it badly. I went to the London Bible College. I was doing my degree. And in the first term, we found out if you failed Greek in the first term, then you didn't have to do it for the rest of the 3 years. So you did it for a term, you failed, it didn't count to your degree, you didn't have to do it. I was in a class of 32 people, I was the youngest, because I went at 18, most people don't go at 18. And I worked this out, and I shared this with a few other people. And of my class of 32, 29 people failed the Greek test. And in this moment, they were like, well, what we're going to do? We all had to go in and see the academic dean, and person after person went in, and they all said it was me. So eventually I had to see the academic dean and the principal and everything else, and they got really cross with us. They then said we were going to do a retest. 28 people passed the retest. I failed the retest. I got 10%, having got 2% in the first. I got taken for the academic dean, and they said to me, so are you disappointed in yourself? I said, no, it's a 500% improvement from the first time. Got in real trouble, and then got taken aside and basically told, and they were right. You got natural leadership. Yeah. You're using it for bad. Yeah. You're the youngest person in your class at a Bible college where people have sold their houses to come to, and you've managed to convince them all to fail a Greek test when actually they should be pursuing academic excellence. Yeah. And it's a bit of a moment for me, actually, because I realised you have influence and you choose how to use it. So naturally I was able to say to people, let's do this, and do it, whether it was good or bad. And I like to think since then, 19 years ago later, I tend to use it for good now.
Yeah, I mean, John Maxwell says, doesn't he, that leadership is influence. And you realise that almost by error, I guess.
By accident.
By accident. In fact, I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you, because I was in my leaders' prayer meeting on Monday evening, and one of my leaders quoted you in a prayer about being a rebel. Yeah. And that your leadership came from being a rebellious child or young person. Is that a fair comment, or were they misquoting you?
No, it's definitely fair. I was banned from church when I was 14 for consistent bad behaviour. Banned for 6 months. Left the church for 4.5 years till I came back quite dramatically. I think what I would say is everything that Christians seem to love about someone like me as an adult, they despised about you as a young person. Okay. So people will say to me, it's great how brave you are. So I'll say some things that other Christians wouldn't say. I'll stand up to culture, you do various media things. It's great how brave you are. I'm an evangelist. I'll say it's great that you're prepared to confront people with a different possibility. It's great that your rebelliousness is redeemed for Jesus. All the things they love when you were a teenager they didn't like. Yeah. And I think it's churches we've got to consider. We work well with the good kids, but what about the naughty ones? Because the most natural people to become leaders often are rebels, because you give a rebel a cause, you redeem the rebelliousness, and off you go. Whereas as a church, I think we often sort of say, well, they're too hard, we'll stick with the nice ones. Then we say, well, where are the people like you? Well, I'll tell you where they are. They're 15 and you kicked them out of church. And so we've got to look at this a little bit, I think. Yeah.
So as a leader, how are you at looking out for those younger people, those potential rebels that you once were? It's one of the challenges, isn't it? We don't always recognise those that were like ourselves. How are you at pulling out alongside and mentoring those potential rebels?
I've always got a bunch of people I'm mentoring, I'll be honest. I always have. When I worked in Youth for Christ, it was normal. My boss in Youth for Christ was a guy called Roy Crown, absolute legend. an absolute legend, and also the missing Mitchell brother from EastEnders. And he invested in me from young, put me in his leadership when I was 23, did all kinds of and made it look like investing in younger was normal. So it's part of my DNA. You're never too busy to be investing in younger.
Yeah.
However, it gets more complicated, I think, as you get a bit older, actually. I'm only 37, but when I was 25, it was easy to be a dangerous collective. I've got a mortgage and kids and life's different. And I want to spend time with younger so that I stay dangerous, actually. So it's not just about me pouring into them, it's about receiving back.
Yeah.
And what I love to do is find people with potential and give them a chance. One of my favourite things as a communicator to do at times is take someone younger with you and they do the middle point of your sermon. So you do the start and the end, so you know it can't go, it's all right. They do the middle, and you give that fun and you journey together and you have a go. So I think there's a thing about doing. When Jesus hangs out with his disciples, who effectively were a youth group, aged 15 to 22, when he hangs out with them, they have an adventure together through which they're empowered, but they also share life. I like to try and take that approach in investing in younger.
Oh, well, I think it's important that we all need to learn. As soon as we think, we are now an older communicator or leader, how are we making sure the younger ones are joining us? We're not just assume that everyone thinks the same way that we do, and how do we make sure we do stay on the edge of that? I'm aware that we hopefully have got a nice live audience out there, not just
you never know.
Our parents watching or something, or our wives or something.
My parents live in the States, they'll be asleep.
But if you do have questions, if you're listening and you've got some questions, you'd like to send them online. We've got Dan here from Spring Harvest head office who's going to help us. So if you can send them in to Dan, and we'll get those questions asked of Gavin. You can ask whatever you want to do. We might have to edit them, but you can ask whatever you like. Please bring on. In the meantime, I do have a few questions I have prepared. Don't worry, Gav. A couple of years ago, you moved from your relative comfort of a known role. Yeah. You're leading Youth for Christ. It's something you've known for many years. You were there for 13 years, I believe. You had a team around you, your friends. And then you made the decision to move and take on a new role. As a leader who's found their sweet spot, successful, writing books, well known, getting the communicating gigs, talking to places, conferences. What caused you to make that move from what was known to what was unknown, uncertainty?
Well, I think in the end it's the Lord. I mean, I don't want to give the predictable answers, but in the end it's the Lord. Yep. But let me be honest, Youth for Christ was even better than you've painted it. I mean, you've got this collective of hundreds of people who are dangerous. There's no rules. You welcome complaint letters. Yeah. It's the least political organisation ever. No Christian thinks it's a bad idea. They might question the method, but no Christian thinks Youth for Christ is a bad idea. Yeah. It was so much fun. And you were hanging out with people. I was doing lots in prisons with young people and schools. I was ace. It was so much fun. And 86% of people who come to faith in the UK are under 25. Yeah. It was brilliant. Yeah. However, I'd been there man and boy. I'd been there 14 years. And the Lord got on my case. There were 3 different prophetic words I had very clearly. God wants to use you across the age groups. He wants to use you with different age groups. There won't just be young people in heaven. And it kept coming, and you kept fighting it. And in the end, it just became so apparently clear. From people I really respect, from people I didn't know. And then I remember being on holiday, and my wife Anne's very direct. Now, this is the thing about my wife Anne. Anyone who's met, she's lovely, but to me she's very direct. So she's lovely to everyone. Your wife's probably a bit like this too. Your Lottie's really like this. Everyone just said, oh, they're lovely, aren't they wonderful? But then with you, bang! And we were on holiday, and she says to me, you're too safe, you're too comfortable, and you're too popular. And God did not make you any of those things.
Wow.
She says, the boat's about to be shaken. And you're like, okay. And then this thing with the Evangelical Alliance came along. Now, I'll be honest, ego and leadership go together. Anyone who tells you they don't, I don't believe you. We all have egos.
That's honest.
I never thought I wouldn't be the boss. And so this opportunity came up at the EA that a number of people put me on my path, and it felt like the Lord was leading me to, but it wasn't leading the EA. It was, I guess, it's not really the number, it was the sort of number 2 role, I guess, but it was the head of evangelism, mission, churches in England and stuff. I'll be honest, that was the hardest thing for me. The humanity in me is like, hang on, I'm at my sweet spot, if you like. I can communicate, I can say we're going over that hill, people will come, and I can raise money. Can't do a lot else. Yeah. So it all sets up for kind of the CEO type role. And but God just made it profoundly clear to me. I went on a run and I was just like, your ego is stopping you becoming what you can be. And I felt the need to develop more and grow. And I was 35 at the time, and I actually felt it was a hinge moment. I can either stick in CEO roles and not develop, or step back and actually really develop, so that when I'm 45 or whatever, be even more sort of useful in the hands of God. So I said, all right, we'll do this, Lord. Went for the job, tried really hard not to get it, really laid into it, and let's face it, Youth for Christ, the Evangelical Alliance, is quite a change. But got the role, The Lord was really clear. And I tell you the most interesting bit, and I will stop because I know I'm a preacher, but the most interesting bit was when I had to go in and tell YFC. Now, Youth for Christ is a fun collective, but we paid badly. You raised half, and it's based in Hales Owen.
Yeah.
Hardly the terms and conditions anyone wanted.
Yeah.
And I went in to tell the team, and I got in my car. We only live 2 miles from work, and not 2 miles like London where I live now, 2 normal miles, 10 minutes. And I got in my car to drive to the work, and you can tell who's been in the car last by what comes on the sound system. And if it's me, sports radio. If it's Anne, worship music, because she's holier than me. And I got in the car, turned the engine on, and what came straight over was Kathy Burton, actually. It's from the Spring Harvest Live album, singing, "Spirit lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you'd call me. Take me deeper than my feet would ever wander, as my faith would become stronger in the presence of my Saviour." That moment, this is the key for me. That moment, it wasn't that it was going to be easy, it was that God was with me. And I'd say to all leaders out there, you have a choice. When Peter walks on the water, he makes a choice, but the disciples who stay in the boat also make a choice. We tend to paint it that the only one who makes a choice is Peter. You make a choice to stick or to move.
Yeah.
And I knew God was telling me to be brave and to move, so I had to. And for many out there, actually, God will be telling you to stay, and that's fine. But don't ignore the opportunities to get out of the boat just because you're safe where you are. Because 2 years on, the first year of all this change really hard, 2 years on, amazing. And the opportunities are not amazing. But in the moment, it's hard because we all want to stick where we're loved and it's comfortable and it's good.
You're telling us a great story about how you transitioned and how that worked well, and you know the words all seem to be so nicely tucked away, and conversation with Anne and so forth. But how did that go down? I'm just thinking sort of personally with your kids and the family and the move, because it's quite a move from Hales Owen to London, a very different culture, different sort of city, community. How did that work personally as well? I mean, because we can tell the stories as leaders, but also how did it work in, if I can be personal about home?
It was hard. I mean, Anne's a leader too. Now the Lord provided an opportunity for her in Stanmore Baptist. My kids were all right. They were a good age to move actually. So they were kind of like 8 and 5. It wasn't too bad. And they liked the adventure, and London's a great city. So it's like, maybe if it'd been the other way, it would have been harder. But the human side of this, we mustn't underestimate. I mean, I've been on the other side. My mum and dad moved to America when I was 17. And I remember saying to my dad, if you go to America, I won't spend another day even pretending to be a Christian. And they still moved. And that led to 6 months of fairly sustained rebellion, at the end of which I gave my life to Jesus, having nearly died drinking too much for my 18th birthday party. Gave my life to Jesus, next day on a park bench on my own. So I've seen the other side. And I think we must be careful not to belittle the cost. And the other thing as leaders we've got to get careful is, Jesus is your number one priority. Ministry isn't. And those two things aren't the same. I think we tend to bunch them together and say, Jesus and my ministry are the same thing. They're not. Your relationship with Jesus is the most important thing in your life.
Absolutely.
But if you've got family and other things, ministry and your relationship with Jesus are very closely linked, but they're not exactly the same thing. And so we do need to consider other things in this, not just go on some selfish pursuit. It's not a career, it's a calling after all.
Is there anything you wish you'd done better in that transition? Do you think you could have communicated or shared better?
I wish I'd finished at YFC in a way that was more honouring of some of the people I'd journeyed with who'd left the organisation by that point. So I was good to the people that were still there, but I didn't. I've been there 14 years. There are a number of people. I had a moment there to write that letter, to publicly affirm that person. I think one of the things I'm learning as I go on is the more people you can thank and the more people you can bless on the way, the better the journey.
Absolutely.
But I think when you're younger, because I've done everything young, and when you're younger, you still feel like the player. You still feel like, to some extent, the world. This is my world. This is what's happening. I think I was a bit blinded of a few people I could have thanked. And I also think it's slightly regretful that we left the Midlands 2 years ago. We were there for 14 years. I'm not sure how many really significant relationships we've taken away. And I think you look back on that and think, I don't want to do that again.
Right.
Not that we did anything wrong or anything nasty, but you think, actually, life is to be shared with people.
Absolutely.
And you want to share that adventure with people. And so I think we're doing friendships a bit differently now too.
Yeah. A learning point for all of us. That as we travel through life, we can either pick people up as almost people to be used, or we can actually people to be journeying with.
Or be used by, actually. I think some of the experiences, actually, you leave and you realise, it depends on where you're based, but where we were living in the Midlands, people never moved away.
Yeah.
So they had all their family, all their school friends, everything in the same place. So we then moved away. Well, in some ways, you then feel like, well, these people must be dead.
Yeah.
But if we'd stayed there, we'd be really close. And so you learn a bit about that, about actually what do you need to do, and how do you need to be involved in that. And I think Christian leaders aren't very good at having hobbies, and aren't really that good at having authentic friendships. I think it's even harder. I see this around, and people like you see it. It's even harder when you're running a church. Where is friendship and congregation? How those two things go together? It's tricky, isn't it?
It is. I remember last year talking to some of my local minister friends, and they were saying you can't be friends with the people in your congregation, which in my church I don't understand, because I'm going, well, these are my friends. These are this is our community, it's our family, it's our extended family. But I think our leadership, especially within a church culture, is only as good as the friends we're forming around us. We are a people-based organisation. Our leadership is not a book or a preach. No. It is a community we're serving, and you know. And now we're moving on. Gavin, you're now working in the Evangelical Alliance.
Yeah.
Are you getting well with your boss, Steve Clifford? Is that going
well?
Man.
Yeah, he's a good man. If you can't get on with Steve Clifford, you can't get on with anyone.
Yeah,
he's a great guy.
So the ego's under control, yeah?
Do you know what? The reason I mention ego is I honestly think that if Christian leaders don't believe they have egos, then we have problems. There's a great book by a guy called Stephen Sylvester called Detox Your Ego.
Okay.
And he works with a lot of sports people, including the mighty AFC Wimbledon, who I support. And he's a great guy. He's connected to our church a bit too. And he talks about how if you make sure that all that you have that could be weakness is pointed in a position of serving the group, then you win. So in a sense, so you put it in terms, my number one strength when you do Strength Finder is competition. Now, when I first did that, I was like, have I got Satan's Strength Finder? It's awful. It's like, my number two one is self-assurance. You're looking at it, it's awful. But actually, redeemed and pointing in the right way, take competition. The church doesn't have enough competitive people in it. Because in one sense, we always lose to everything, whether that's culture or other things. Whereas actually, if I compete alongside all my Christian brothers and sisters to try and win this nation for Jesus, there's a positive outlook and an outlet for it. Yeah. And I think what we need to do is, instead of saying, this is what I do, this is what I don't do, or this is what I do badly, we need to say, well, Lord, how can you redeem this element of who I am so it can be used to glorify you? And I think the most helpful thing to learn as well is just how massive Jesus is. Yeah. So however big your ego is, let's face it, he's the saviour of the world. He made the world. He's a bit more special than you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. He's not sitting in heaven thinking, I wish I was more like you.
No.
Absolutely not.
No, even I don't think that.
Or anyone else. You travel around the UK a lot,
yeah.
and I've just mentioned I've got some questions coming in. Thank you for those who are starting to write questions in. We'll get to those in just a moment. Don't worry, I've got a list growing here. Thank you for those who put those in. You travel around the UK a lot, which gives you a really interesting perspective on the UK church, that many of us who lead our own local church see the world through our own local setting. Do you have any kind of take on the state of the church at this moment in time around the UK? That's a big question, but in your recent travels around the UK, are there things you've taken away and think, we're doing this really well, or we must do better at that, or generally this is a really healthy point?
I think you can't not notice the social engagement of the church. Yeah. Some incredible things, the growth of food banks and street pastors and CAP centres, and it's amazing, utterly phenomenal. Yeah. I think with that, with certainly the obvious exception being CAP, because they get word and deed perfectly together. But I think with a lot of that, there's a challenge then to make sure we're spreading enough seed.
Yeah, it's good.
We're working the land more than we've ever worked it, but we're arguably spreading less seed than we've ever spread. Yeah. So we need to make sure that word and deed are in balance. Let's not stop any of the social, but let's make sure that the word's there too. And I think some churches are starting to get a bit dissatisfied with doing 6 or 7 projects and not seeing people come to faith. And so I think there's a need for those two things together. I think where we're seeing an unusual amount of people coming to faith. I see people come to faith most Sundays. What's the number one tip? Ask. Yeah. So I think we are seeing a hunger for the gospel. I think there's a hopelessness in our culture in which there can be a hope found in Jesus. Yeah. I think Brexit gives the church a wonderful opportunity. Forget how you voted. It doesn't matter. Though I live in London, so you can guess. But but in reality, a disunited country is a wonderful opportunity for a united church to give a different message.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the other things that's blown me away is the size of the church across ethnicities. I say it often, you've heard me say often, but 25% of evangelicals aren't white. So even just this year, I did an event in Brighton, 1,500 people. I was the only white person in the room. It was every redeemed pastor in the UK, the Redeemed Christian Church of God, and some spouses. It's 1,000 pastors in this room, basically talking to them on how to reach white people. There's 350 South Asian churches in the UK. The breadth of the church is incredible. And what I love about that is you can go into any context and there's brothers and sisters, never different. I preached at a large black church in Croydon recently. They asked me over lunch, what made you feel uncomfortable in the service? Well, that was easy. This worship went on for 55 minutes, and during it, they told us to stand up and all dance. I said, when God made me, he made me white. It means my hips don't move. And so, there are differences. But I'm amazed at that as well. But to paint a slightly negative picture too, I think the next 10 years are going to be really hard, and then it's going to be amazing. Something like the Evangelical Alliance that I work for, the membership might go down in the next 10 years because I think liberalism is going to have a little spike. But then I think people are going to realise that the Bible-based, clear Christianity that believes in conversion and salvation and everything else will come back with power. So I think in 20 years' time, something like the Evangelical Alliance will have twice the membership it has now. But I think the next 10 years will be interesting. I think when British values mean if you don't sign up to that, you lose your gift aid.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, that'll be an interesting moment. Now, I want to talk a bit about Spring Harvest before we get to our questions, because you've just taken on the leadership of Spring Harvest, which, I find fascinating. That there needs to be some sort of elephant in the room here.
Yeah.
Your dad, Clive Calver, was one of the founders of Spring Harvest. And I was with one of the other founders, Micah Jazz, the other day, and there was this group of people back in that day, 30 whatever it was years ago, that decided we must do something new, probably never thinking that one day my son will be taking on a role within this. And also I'm aware, which I also find amusing, that when you were a teenager at Spring Harvest, it wasn't always great.
No.
And I think you told me once that you ended up in a report about young Calver, misbehaving at Spring Harvest.
4 weeks on site is no excuse for a disgusting attitude and no understanding of how to behave, I think, if that was the quote.
And the fact you can actually quote it worries me a little bit, but okay, we can do a little bit of counselling after we've gone offline or something. Good, But, to go from that place where, you're a teenager, you're struggling with your faith, you're struggling with your dad and running this big event, and you end up then weirdly going through this journey of finding faith, speaking at this event and others, and then ending up taking on the leadership role just in the last few weeks. You must have thought that you never saw that coming.
Yep, totally.
Not definitely 18 years ago, maybe the last 2 years, but not the last. Any thoughts around that? Conversation with your dad, maybe.
I think there's 2 or 3 important things here from a leadership point of view. Firstly, let's all ditch comparison, shall we?
That's good.
I think a root of so much evil is comparison.
Yeah.
So we if you look sideways, you feel better about yourself or worse about yourself. Neither outcome's positive.
Yeah.
So there's some basic DNA here. So I didn't hear my dad preach. I think I heard him preach once as a teenager. Yeah. Then when I started preaching at 19, everyone would say to me, "You're copying the way your dad preaches." I'd not heard him preach. Yeah. But then I saw him preach. Yeah. And there's this funny thing I do. People won't have even noticed, but when I get nervous, I bend my right leg for no apparent reason. So that's the only way you can tell I'm nervous, because I project confidence about it. But I bend my right leg when I'm really nervous. So my dad preached did exactly the same thing. That's genetics.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
Yeah.
And there's something in my DNA that I fought for years. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like this. It's one of the reasons I don't want to go to church. I'm one of 4. The other 3 didn't sin. I made up for it. I wanted to be a footballer. Never quite happened. But then in the end, when I came to faith, I said to the Lord, I'll go wherever, whatever, and whenever for you. And I've ended up leading Youth for Christ. My dad led Youth for Christ. He started Spring Harvest when he was the head of Youth for Christ. And I work for the EA. In the EA's 171-year history, its 2 most successful times have been under my dad and my granddad. Because my mum's dad was head of EA. He started Tear Fund, by the way. Yeah. He was, by getting a load of checks in when he was head of EA and starting the Evangelical Alliance Relief Fund. So you've got all of this. And you fight and fight and fight against it. But then I was about 25, and I remember I got asked to speak on the big top at Spring Harvest, which would be one of the youngest people to do that. And it was a massive moment. Actually, do I do this or not? Yeah. And when I decided to do it, I had this long chat with Anne and I said, all right, Anne, I'm 25. I've got to now accept I'm either going to be a big boy and I'm going to accept things that come with this and not that don't, and not fight my DNA, or I'm going to keep fighting this and behaving like a child. Yeah. Stepped into it and accepted, if you cut me in half, what am I? I want to unite the church and reach the lost. That's the same for 5 or 6 generations in my family. The fact that it's all in the UK doing things, it's fine. Yeah. But it might maybe be the same with my children. But you know what? They don't have to work for these organisations or things. These are just models for doing this. When Spring Harvest was started, it wasn't intended to be here forever. It was started in that season to unite the church and reach the lost. Now in our season, because it's not just me, it's you and loads of others. In our season, let's unite the church and reach the lost.
Absolutely.
So it's,
No, and I think that comparison is really important. I think church leaders are probably the worst at this. You get together with another church leader, within minutes someone says, how big is your church? Yep. Comparison is just rife, and how many salvations, or how big is your children's ministry, or how good is your, work in the community, and we all feel like we have to list out our CV somehow as some kind of business card. And I think you're absolutely right. Our comparison is not about others, but about what we've been called to do, and comparing ourselves to our calling, not towards our neighbours in the next church who seem more successful, because they always look more successful on social media. I've found they always look better from afar, don't they, than when you actually get beneath the skin.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I get to preach at some of the allegedly most amazing churches in the UK. And allegedly, it's not fair, but I go to them. Let me tell you, friends, they've got the same issues.
Absolutely.
Hopeless people finding hope in Jesus and journeying. The only thing to talk about with other church leaders is how great is your Jesus. Because if we all become a bit more fascinated but with Jesus, then we will all become more on it and more able to transform this nation.
Cool. So a couple of questions for you coming in. The first thing is from Paul, who's watching in Plymouth. It's not made up.
What do you mean it's not made up?
Well, Paul from Plymouth. It just sounds like it's... Anyway, don't laugh. This is very serious. Here you go. What has been the hardest lesson you've learned in your leadership? What's been the hardest lesson you've learned? It's a tough one, isn't it? Thank you, Paul, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. There's been a number, but I think the single hardest one for me is living under the utter authority of God. I want to do stuff often in my own giftedness.
Yeah.
I want to do stuff on my terms, but living out that prayer, whatever, wherever, whenever, is the hardest thing. Living under that authority, and also knowing that He's in total control. It's so obvious, but it's as a young evangelist, I first started out, I remember I was being mentored by Roy Crown in this, and I preached twice when I was 21 in the same month. Once, loads of people came to faith. Once, no one. Do you know what the feedback is from the crowd when this happened? When loads come to faith, wasn't God good? When no one comes to faith, bit too much of you, Gav.
Yeah.
And actually, I learned during that, it's all God. And I'm going to come under His authority and do what He does. But the hardest lesson for me remains, it's all you, Lord. So people always tell me what I'm going to do the rest of my life. But there's only one person who knows, it ain't me.
Yeah.
And living under that authority is a constant lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to keep learning as leaders, never stop. I've got a couple more questions here. Lisa, a Baptist minister, has asked this question. They're asking you some tough questions today, Gav. When you get things wrong, if you remember when that happened, but when you get things wrong,
Yes, sir.
how do you handle it? This is an important part of it. How do you handle it on the inside and on the outside? So when you get things wrong as a leader, or as a parent, or as a husband, how do you handle it on the inside and on the outside? How do you present yourself, and how do you kind of process it?
Let's do the inside first. I think the closer I get to Jesus and the more responsibility I take on, the more broken I feel. And in some ways, the more sinful I feel.
Yeah.
When I came to faith, I thought, if I deal with that, and that, do you know what? God's going to be pleased with me.
Yeah.
But the closer I get to Jesus, the more I realise His greatness and holiness, the more inadequate I feel. So I think when I get it wrong, and I get it wrong very regularly, I just feel once more, Lord, I'm just sorry, I'm so broken. And so you just feel disappointed in yourself. And you also just feel like that child again. I'm so pleased. Our friend Rob Parsons will say, God doesn't have grandchildren. I'm so pleased He doesn't. I'm His child. And you know what? You can always come back and deal with it. But I just feel like, oh, you've done it again. Especially with me. I'll be honest. I'm so painfully predictable. So it's not like the 2 or 3 areas in which I get it wrong are fairly easy to guess. And they happen fairly consistently. You start you believe your own hype, or you do this thing, or I'm quite fast with my tongue. And so you can go too far with... You can win any argument, those sort of things. And you've done it again, Gav.
Yeah.
I must really annoy the Lord that I get the same thing wrong so often. I think externally, there's a really, really important word that leaders don't use enough, and I try and use as often as possible. Sorry. I think there's a new type of Christian leader coming through that doesn't look to defend themselves, but looks to be more authentic. It's just sorry.
Yeah.
And sorry, the famous song, sorry seems to be the hardest word. It's a really important word. And I think be quick to say sorry. Because also, saying sorry diffuses stuff. If you let things grow, they destroy you, they consume you. Even little things, and so be direct, be honest, and be quick to say sorry.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think maybe, especially from my experience, male leaders sometimes struggle most with admitting I got it wrong, I made a mistake. Hands up. But it does diffuse. It breaks open a conversation that we couldn't have had before. Vulnerability is very powerful.
And it makes Christian leadership accessible.
Yes.
I'm not being funny. If you never say sorry, you seem perfect. We have created... There's this funny thing goes on around Christian leaders. We like to put people on pedestals, but there's only one thing we like more than putting people on pedestals, is them falling off them.
Yes. What's that about?
What most upsets me. I find it really difficult when our Christian leaders fall into sexual sin, have an affair, or whatever else. I find it really disappointing. But what I find even more disappointing when they do that is how it seems to make some other people feel better about themselves because they haven't done it. And we've got to stop all of this. We're in this together. Leadership is a calling because the Lord didn't have anything else for you to do. You know, so you get on and do that while everyone else does all the other stuff. It's just being your part in the body.
Absolutely.
And we mustn't venerate people. I used to have, growing up back in the days of Spring Harvest, when you used to have 70,000 people at Spring Harvest over 10 weeks, whatever, and my dad was like treated like he was the Pope, and it was, people would come, they'd be almost like, there he is. Yeah. And I'd think to myself, do you know, he smells the same as anyone. In fact, maybe he smells worse. And what we've got to do is normalise who people are, not put them up on those pedestals, because there's only one place to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good advice, Gav. I've got another question here from another Gavin, actually. Gavin in Southbourne.
Wow, there aren't many of us.
There's at least two of you here. How do you seek to address the challenges facing an ageing church? Yeah. An ageing church. And he's talking about a specific thing in their church about trying to to appoint a new senior pastor in their church in Southbourne. But particularly, you know, there are some churches that are facing an issue of older demographic and, you know, reducing, you know, small children, especially sort of, you know, children's program. How do you face these challenges? Because you can make it sound so easy, and you'll work with Youth for Christ and all ages. And what about churches where, you know, we're 30, 40, 50 people on a Sunday, and 80% of them are a retirement age?
I think you've got a choice. If you're running a church like that, you've got a choice. And actually, either choice is okay, but you innovate or you die. Okay. And so, if you keep doing business as usual, you're not going to attract new generations. Because you've got to look at your style. Is it experiential? Is it participative? Are you using images? Is it connected to life? There's some basics, there's some real simples in there. But there's nothing wrong with saying, actually, it's a lot of work for this to change. You know, the church won't be wiped out in this country. We know that. Absolutely no way. Church won't be wiped out in this country. But sometimes we have to say, actually, that served a real purpose. It's too much to change it. Other times we say, well, no, let's totally change it. So one of the things that upset me, but also blessed me when I led YFC, I opened this letter, and out fell a cheque for 40 grand. And I was like, okay. Read the letter. It was to YFC, by the way, not me. I read the letter, and the letter said, we've got a church of 11. It's too much effort to reimagine it for a new generation. So we've sold the building, here's half the money. Wow. Now, I admired the pragmatism, but I also grieved a little for that church, because that was started by someone and you want things to last. But it does come a point where you ask that question. And I think if a church with a growing elderly congregation, growing elderly, not growing numbers, if you're not prepared to transform the style to reach new people, then finish well. Wow. If you're prepared to change the style, let's change the style. Because in reality, the church is the only institution, as William Temple said, designed entirely for the benefit of non-members. We've got to think about new generations, we've got to think about change. But sometimes that's too much. And if you look at history, things go, things come. But what will not stop happening in this country is engagement with Jesus with new generations. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you, Gav, for that. That's some tough comments there you're making there. Innovate or die is, I don't know if we're going to tweet that or not from the Spring Harvest, but that's like, but I think there's a reality there. We need to be honest and reflect on ourselves as churches. And go for innovate. You know, let's be honest. If we can. Let's try. Yes, that's right. If not, Gavin will be your consultant. We'll come and help you with the Evangelical Alliance. There is another option as well. There is another option. We did this when I was at Youth for Christ many times, and we didn't plant churches, we were clear on that, but we did help set up the odd ecclesial community, perhaps. So you'd go to a church, Sunday nights are dead, aren't they, often? But people don't really do Sunday nights anymore. And so what you'd say is, okay, why don't you try something on a Sunday night, aimed at young people? And what you find over time is the older people prefer that. Because we have this myth that there's youth culture and old culture. There isn't. People watch the same telly. People like you and I try desperately to hold on to be 20-somethings, which we're clearly not. You know, there's a new way of learning. The average attention span of an adult in Great Britain is less than a goldfish of an adult of any age. You know, so it's not just younger people who can't concentrate. You find a different style. The church style in this country has not changed for nearly 35 years. But the substance of the message never changes. The style should change like the wind. And what we've got to ask ourselves is, are we making style sacred? Style's not sacred. We celebrate Hudson Taylor and others who go around the world and understand culture to build a platform for the gospel. Do we do it here? And so I think the challenge to us in our churches is, do we need to change the style to reach new people? But please don't change the substance. If you want to put off new generations, go liberal. Don't do that. Hold to the substance. Change the style like the wind. Absolutely.
It's a great quote from Andy Stanley. He says, "We must stay married to our mission, but marginally infatuated with our style."
Yeah,
I think that's a great kind of, it's like a girlfriend we used to love, but we don't anymore. But the married to the mission is something we're really committed to for the rest of our lives. I think that's so true. We're going to bring some things to an end here, Gav. I've got one last question for you, which I've been desperate to ask. I've always thought of myself as a lifelong optimist.
Okay.
I've always thought that life is always, my glass is always more than half full. Yeah. It's fuller than everyone else's. And then I met you. And I kind of felt like a bit of a poor version of an optimist because you kind of take even every football failure into some kind of success, and football is your passion, I know. But I've just got how much of that is really who you are, and how much of that is something you almost try and tell yourself? Is an optimist as a leader something you almost put on like a coat, or is it something that's fully within you, or something you've developed or trained? Because I think leadership and optimism need to go together somewhere. Pessimistic leaders have very few followers. I just wonder if you want to comment on that side of you.
It is arguably the most authentic thing about me, is this unwavering commitment to the fact that the future's better than the past. I just don't. I don't see the world in anything other than colour. And I it's why I totally believe that in our lifetime we're going to see revival in the United Kingdom. I really do. I think we're going to see shopping centres stop selling stuff because the presence of God invades it, and just things happen. I think we're going to see prisons where you can't get people back into their cells because they've given their lives to Jesus. I think you can see football matches delayed because people are singing about Jesus, not about 22 men running after an inflated pig's bladder. It's just it's how I'm wired. The only other option for me is that I die believing it's coming tomorrow. But either way, that optimism's rooted in me. I also think AFC Wimbledon will win the Champions League in my lifetime, and I think England will win the World Cup. But you know what? I don't know anyone who doesn't like that fact of my personality. So what's interesting about it, I think people are always cynical because Brits are naturally cynical. But no one isn't drawn to the fact that I think things are going to be good. Now, they love laughing at you when it doesn't happen. So next summer, obviously, England are going to win the World Cup. Now, that's... I choose to believe that. Now, it's not as something I'm putting on. I just want to be optimistic, and I'll go all in with things. That's who I am. I often get introduced, I think it was recently, with some black church leaders. You'll like Gavin because he's got the wrong personality for his nationality. And what they meant by that was he's an optimistic, cynical Brit. There aren't that many of those, but I think there should be a few more.
And the church should be the place where we are meant to be a people of hope.
But we're not deluded.
No.
So when things go wrong, you learn to have the resilience to cope with disappointment. So we've had some hard things. Me and Anne lost a baby. We had a really hard time with our second kid, in health-wise and stuff. It's not like there's no shortage of hurt. It's not like I'm one of these people who's grown up in a Walton's version of life and nothing goes wrong. Things go wrong. Even this week, this Manchester thing's absolutely disastrous, utterly disastrous. But what I notice in that through my personality is I notice all the heroes doing amazing things. Now that guy that did such an evil act, that's a different thing. But look at what it does in other people. And you have a choice. In life, if you take a beach ball with 8 coloured panels on it, whichever panel you look at depends what you see. And when God made me, he made a hopeful prophet. Now, other people are there to bring balance to that. But that's who I am. And do you know what? The future's amazing for the UK church. Because otherwise the grave's not empty. If the grave is empty, you've won the war. You can lose the odd battle, but you'll never lose the war. And we've got to start realising what we've got. Our world teaches us to be dissatisfied. You need a new iPhone because your old one isn't good enough. You get the iPhone, you'll be perfect. No, because the minute that happens, you need another iPhone. What we've got to do is be thankful for what we have, out of which comes contentment. Out of contentment comes satisfaction. Out of satisfaction comes gratitude. Out of gratitude comes hope. Out of hope comes transformation. Or you'll only be happy if you get the next new thing. We need to fight against that.
Absolutely. Well, Gavin, thank you very much, and thank you for your optimism. We need that in the UK church. We need that at Spring Harvest. We're excited by the future of Spring Harvest with your leadership, and myself being part of that team, I'm excited personally about seeing how it's going to shape up. Thank you for those who've joined us on our webinar, either live or if you're watching a recording. It's been great to have you with us. Next month, we're going to have Malcolm Duncan, who is the senior leader of Gold Hill Baptist Church and a well-known author, and he'll be coming to join us. Please do take some time to look at the Essential Christian website. There are some great resources for your church from this year's Spring Harvest, One for All, but also from last year as well. Gavin and Anne wrote the theme there, Game Changers. Get hold of that if you want to. But thank you for joining us at Essential Christian Leadership. We hope these webinars are helpful to you, because we do believe that as leaders grow stronger, your church will grow stronger as well. Thank you for joining us.
God bless.